The air smelled like burning metal. Smoke rose from the broken ship, glowing orange against the dark trees. Sergeant Jace Riker stepped carefully over twisted parts of the alien vessel. His boots made soft, crunching sounds on broken glass and ash. His blaster was ready in his hand, eyes sharp, body tense. The crash had lit up half the forest, and he was the first on the scene. The ship was small. Maybe a scout or smuggler craft. No markings, no signal. Echo 1 to base. Jace said into his wrist, "Come, ship is down, heat signatures faint." Moving in to check for survivors, he climbed over a chunk of the hull and froze, there, under a bent section of the outer shell. He heard something breathing, faint and fast. Jace moved quietly, then crouched and lifted the metal piece. A girl looked back at him. She was alien, no doubt about that. Silver skin, short white hair, glowing purple lines across her cheeks like tattoos. She looked young, maybe 17 in human years, but her eyes were fierce, filled with fire, like she was ready to fight him with her bare hands. Jace blinked, caught off guard by how calm she looked under all that rubble. She wasn't scared, she wasn't begging. She was watching him like he was the one who should be afraid. "What the hell am I supposed to do with you?" he muttered, more to himself than to her. The girl didn't answer, just narrowed her eyes. Her wrists were bound with alien cuffs. One of her legs looked injured. There was a long cut across her temple, but she didn't flinch. "Are you the pilot?" Jace asked, still silence. He sighed and tapped his cum. "I've got one survivor, female, alien. Possibly a fugitive." Bringing her in, Jace reached out, but she leaned away. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said firmly, "but I am taking you in." He pulled her out gently, but kept his blaster ready. Just in case, she didn't resist, but she never took her eyes off him. Not for a second, he placed her in the hover skiff, locking the restraints as a safety step. The ride back to Outpost 17 was quiet. Jace kept looking at her in the rear monitor, confused. Why was a girl like her on a smuggler ship? Why didn't she say anything? When they arrived, the guards stared. "That her?" one asked, pointing. "Only one alive," Jace replied. "She hasn't said a word." They put her in the small holding cell at the far end of the outpost. Behind energy glass, she sat down on the floor, back straight, still watching. Jace stood outside the cell and sighed. "You know, usually when someone survives a crash, they ask for help," he said. "Or at least say thank you." She blinked slowly, like she didn't care. He leaned closer to the glass. "Who are you?" "Tio." "Nothing." He shook his head, ready to turn away. Then she spoke, voice quiet but clear. "They're coming," she said. Jace stopped. "Who's coming?" She looked up, her face unreadable. "You took me," she whispered. "Now they'll come for you, too." Before Jace could respond, the lights flickered. A warning alarm beeped from the command desk nearby. Unidentified ships approaching. A voice called over the speaker. "They're not responding to hails." Jace turned to look at the monitors. 3 ships, fast and silent. "We're heading right for the outpost. They're not here for war," the girl said softly from the cell. "They're here for me." Jace stared at her, confused. "Who are you?" he asked again, voice harder now. She stood slowly inside the cell, her purple eyes glowing a little brighter. "I was never the smuggler," she said. "I was the cargo." And then, before Jace could say anything else, the first explosion rocked the outpost. The explosion shook the walls like thunder. Lights flickered and alarms screamed through the outpost. Jace grabbed his blaster and ran to the command room, shouting orders, but everything was chaos. Smoke poured from the east wing. 2 officers were already down, burned and bleeding. He turned to the screen. The enemy ships had landed, no markings. No ID, but the weapons were advanced, clean, and deadly, not pirates. Not bounty hunters, this was professional, coordinated, locked down the cells. Jace yelled, but it was already too late when he turned back to check on the girl. The glass was broken, her cell was empty, his heart pounded, blaster raised. He searched the hallway, then stopped as he saw her standing calmly near the main door, cuffs still on, eyes glowing softly in the red emergency lights. "You broke out," he said, aiming his weapon. "I should shoot you right now." She didn't flinch. She looked at him, then said something strange. "If you leave me here, they'll kill you." Jace frowned. "You think I'm stupid enough to trust you?" She didn't answer, but something in her expression shifted. Like pain, not fear like guilt, the door behind her exploded inward. Metal flying, fire bursting out, and through the smoke, dark figures appeared. Tall, armored, no faces. Just black helmets and glowing blue visors. Jace fired, hitting one square in the chest. But the armor took the hit. The figure barely stumbled. The girl screamed something in her language, sharp and fast, and the soldiers paused. One of them raised a hand, signaling to not shoot her. They wanted her alive. Jace grabbed her arm and pulled her behind cover. She struggled for a second, then followed him willingly. "Why are they here?" He shouted over the gunfire. "Tell me now, they don't want witnesses," she said. "You saw me? They'll erase you." Blasts hit the walls near them. One cracked the floor beside his head. "We're dead if we stay," Jace said, looking toward the emergency exit. "Can you run?" She nodded. Even with her legs still injured, they dashed down the side hallway. Alarms blaring louder now as more parts of the outpost exploded behind them. At the emergency hatch, Jace slammed the control. But it beeped red power failure. The girl stepped forward, placed her hand on the panel. And it flashed green. The door opened. Jace stared at her. "How did you know time?" she said, grabbing his sleeve. "They'll find us again soon, outside." The night was filled with smoke and falling ash. The ships above hovered silently. Watching, scanning, they ran through the forest, branches cutting Jace's face, his lungs burning. The girl limping but fast. After half an hour, they stopped near an old mining cave, hidden by vines and rock. Inside, they collapsed to the ground, breathing hard. Jace looked at her, sweat dripping from his face. "Start talking," he said. Voice low and cold. "You're going to tell me who you are, and why those soldiers want you alive." She looked up, eyes no longer glowing, just tired, and said softly, "I was raised by the ones you just saw." Jace froze. "They call themselves the Varn," she continued. "They take orphans from conquered planets, train them, turn them into tools." "You were one of them?" Jace asked. She nodded. "But I ran." "Why?" "Because I found out what they're planning," she whispered, "and Earth is next." Jace's hands tightened on his weapon, but he didn't aim it this time. He just stared at her, confused, angry, and unsure what to believe. "And now?" he asked, "What do you expect me to do with you?" She looked him in the eyes and said, "You have two choices. Kill me, or help me stop them." The silence inside the cave felt heavier than the smoke outside, and for the first time, Jace didn't know what to say. Rain began to fall over the forest, soft at first, then harder, tapping on the rocks above the cave. Jace sat at the edge of the opening, scanning the tree line, eyes sharp, blaster resting across his knee. The girl still nameless to him sat, curled against the far wall, arms wrapped around her knees. Neither of them spoke for a while. The only sound was the wind and the crackling of small stones shifting deep within the cave. He didn't trust her, not yet, but she had saved his life twice. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice quiet. "I didn't lie to you." Jace didn't turn. "Doesn't mean you told the truth either." "I didn't tell you everything," she admitted, "but I couldn't. You were just another human soldier to me." "You were cargo," he said. And now I'm running from death squads because I opened the wrong door." She didn't argue. She only nodded. "I was supposed to be delivered," she continued. "Not rescued." Jace finally turned to her. "To who?" "To a general," she said. "The Varn planned to gift me back to him as a sign of loyalty." Jace frowned. "What are you? Some kind of weapon?" The girl looked away. "Not exactly." He walked over, stood in front of her, arms crossed. "Start from the beginning." She hesitated, then reached under the collar of her torn suit and pulled out a small, blinking device, a data shard. Jace tensed, but she didn't move to attack. Instead, she placed it gently on the ground between them. "This has everything," she said. "Proof of what they've done. And what they're planning to do." Jace picked it up, holding it to the light. The shard glowed with soft blue pulses. Encrypted, old tech. "We'll need a data core to unlock this," he said. "Military grade." "There's one," she whispered. "Not far from here. Abandoned research site. Pre-war era. Underground." Jace narrowed his eyes. "And you just happen to know where it is?" "I lived there," she said, "before they took me." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Tomorrow at first light," he said. "We head there." That night, they took turns resting. But neither of them truly slept. Every crack of a branch outside, every shift in the wind, kept them alert. At dawn, the forest was still and foggy, thick mist curling between the trees like smoke. They moved quickly, avoiding open paths, ducking under fallen trunks and slipping across cold riverbeds. Jace kept glancing at her, half out of habit, half because something didn't sit right. She wasn't just a fugitive. She moved like a soldier. And yet sometimes, in quiet moments, she looked lost, like a child trying to remember who she used to be. After hours of silent hiking, they reached a cliffside covered in moss and vines. The girl stepped forward and placed her palm against the rock wall. With a soft hum, a circle of stone slid inward, revealing a dark tunnel. Jace stared. "That's not normal, I told you," she said. Stepping into the dark, "I was raised by them. But I remember the old codes." They walked into the tunnel, boots echoing on metal, lights blinking on as they passed. The deeper they went, the colder it got. The air smelled like dust and power cells. Jace saw old labs, shattered glass, half dismantled, machines and deep claw marks on the walls. "What happened here?" he asked. "They tested things," she whispered, "on people like me." He clenched his fists but said nothing. Finally, they reached a small control room. Dead screens flickered weakly, and in the center, an access port still intact. Jace slid the shard into the slot. The lights around them surged, systems rebooted, and a hologram flickered to life in front of them. The first image was of Earth, marked with red targets. The words Phase 2, Human Subjugation, glowed at the top. Jace stared at it, his breath caught in his throat. "This is what I tried to stop," she said, voice low. "But now?" "Maybe you can." He looked at her, really looked at her this time, and for the first time, he saw not an enemy, but someone broken and brave. But before he could speak, an alarm triggered again, echoing through the corridor. Something or someone had just entered the base from above, and they weren't alone anymore. The sound echoed like a drumbeat inside the old base. Distant but getting closer, slow footsteps mixed with sharp mechanical clinks. Jay stepped back from the console, blaster raised. Eyes fixed on the hallway behind them. "They found us," he whispered. The girl stared at the glowing map on the wall, lips tight, then turned and grabbed the data shard from the slot. "Come on," she said. "There's another way out, but it's not safe. Nothing has been safe since I met you," muttered, following her into the dark. They passed through a maintenance corridor lined with pipes and wires, broken lights flickering like dying stars. As they turned a corner, a low, static voice came through an old speaker overhead. Subject 239. Surrender now. Return. To your handlers. Jace stopped in his tracks, turning toward her slowly. Is that you? He asked 239. She didn't answer, just kept walking faster. He caught up, grabbing her arm. You said they raised you, but you didn't say they owned you. She pulled her arm away. They don't anymore. You sure about that? He snapped. Because? That voice sounded like it expects you to come crawling back. The hallway shook again as a deep metallic roar echoed through the base. They're using hunters, she said, her voice tight with fear. Synthetic soldiers built to track. Me, how many? Jace asked. Just one, she said. But that's enough. They ran down into a lower chamber, filled with water up to their ankles. The lights here were completely dead. Jace used his torch, sweeping the beam across the room. They passed. Rusted medical chairs, broken monitors, and blood-stained restraints still hanging from the walls. This place, he said softly. What did they do to you here? The girl didn't stop, but her voice trembled. They wanted to turn us into something else, something better than human, better than alien. And did it work? She turned her face to him, her eyes glowing faintly. I don't know anymore. A door up ahead groaned open, ancient gears grinding slowly. Behind it was a vertical shaft lined with ladders and emergency lights. That leads to the surface, she said. We go up, we disappear into the forest again. They began climbing, Jace first, the girl right behind, metal creaking with every step. But halfway up, a sound made Jace freeze. Something below them was climbing too. Not fast, not clumsy, precise. Relentless, he looked down and saw it 7 feet tall, silver armor, glowing blue eyes, half organic, half machine, the hunter. Its face shifted slightly as if it could smell them, the girl whispered. It was one of the first. You fought it before. She nodded. It doesn't stop, not unless you burn every part of it. Jace swore under his breath and climbed faster, but the rungs were slick. One broke loose under his boot, nearly sending him falling. They reached the top hatch, and he slammed the release, but it was rusted shut. He turned and fired his blaster down the shaft. Hitting the hunter's shoulder, sparks flew, but it didn't even flinch. Shoot the hinges, she said, pushing past him. I'll hold it off. You'll die. Then you better hurry. She dropped a small spherical device down the shaft. It exploded midair, filling the space with smoke and magnetic pulses. The hunter paused, glitching slightly. Jace took aim and fired 3 shots at the hatch's hinges. Metal groaned and bent. He kicked it with all his strength. And finally, the door flew open. Cold air rushed in. The smell of trees and wet leaves. He turned and grabbed her hand, pulling her through. Just as the hunter burst through the smoke below, arms reaching, they tumbled out onto the surface, gasping for breath. Above them, the clouds were heavy and black. Rain falling again, but they were alive, for now. They ran until the trees swallowed them. The abandoned base sinking behind them like a memory too painful to hold. When they stopped, Jace looked at her, soaked and shaking, but still standing. I don't even know your name, he said, voice rough. She looked at him. I don't have one, she replied. Not anymore. Then pick one, he said. You're not their tool. Not their subject, she thought for a moment, then said softly, Lyra. All right, Lyra, Jace said. You just became the most wanted girl in the galaxy. And you, she said with a faint smile, just became my only ally. The forest stretched wide and endless before them. Dark leaves, heavy with rain. Strange sounds echoing in the distance. But Jace and Lyra kept walking. Neither had spoken in hours. Their bodies exhausted, soaked, and bruised. But neither one asked to stop. Jace's cum finally crackled to life. Static at first, then a voice broke through. Sergeant Riker, respond immediately. This is Central Command. He paused, looked at Lyra, then slowly answered, "This is Riker," he said. His voice cold, still breathing. "Report." The voice ordered. "Your signal vanished during the smuggler crash incident. What is your status?" Jace hesitated, then said, "Outpost 17 was attacked. Unknown hostiles. Most of the team is dead." There was a long silence on the line, and the fugitive. Jace's grip on the comm tightened. Lyra stood still beside him, not hiding, not begging, just watching. "She's with me," he said, finally. "She's not what you think. You were ordered to detain and deliver her to the Nova processing facility." The voice snapped. "Your mission parameters were clear." "She has information you need to see," Jace said. "It's bigger than one arrest." "Bigger than protocol. We'll send a dropship," the voice replied. "Stay put and do not engage in further unauthorized activity." The signal cut. Jace lowered the comm, staring at it like it had just burned him. Lyra broke the silence. "You shouldn't have done that. They need to know the truth," Jace said. She shook her head. "You still think they want the truth?" He looked at her, rain dripping from his hair, eyes heavy with doubt. "You think they'll come to kill me?" She nodded slowly. "You've seen the data. You've helped me escape. Now, you're not a soldier to them. You're a liability." They found a small ridge near a broken shuttle, half buried in vines and moss, a perfect hiding spot for the night. Inside, Lyra sat with her back to the wall, staring at the blinking shard in her hand. Jace sat across from her, watching her silently. "What did they make you do?" he asked, voice low. She didn't look up, but her fingers trembled. "They trained us to blend in," she said, "to lie, to kill, to destroy from the inside. And you ran." She nodded, "but not before I hurt people, people who trusted me." Jace leaned forward. "You're not that person anymore. Maybe," she whispered, "but I still remember every name." The night passed slowly, shadows moving across the shuttle walls, wind howling outside like distant voices. At dawn, the sound of engines echoed above the trees. Jace stepped out carefully, scanning the sky. A dark gray dropship hovered low, its lights sweeping the forest like search beams. "Command's here," he said, returning inside. Lyra stood, shoulders tense. "Are you giving me up?" she asked, no anger in her voice, just quiet pain. Jace looked at her, then pulled his blaster and checked the charge. "No," he said, "but they'll try to take you anyway." They slipped through the back hatch and ran into the tree's branches, whipping their faces, boots sliding on wet roots. Voices shouted behind them. Armored boots thundered through the forest. Drones buzzed above like angry insects. One beam of light hit Jace's shoulder, sending him crashing into the dirt. Lyra turned back, grabbing his arm, helping him up even as the troopers closed in. "Go," he gasped. "Run." She shook her head. "Not without you." They found cover behind a thick tree trunk. Jace fired a few shots, forcing the soldiers back. Then, from the left, a sharp voice called out, loud and clear, "Sergeant Riker, stand down. This is your last warning." He peeked out and saw Commander Vallis, his old superior, blaster drawn, armor bright and untouched. "You're making a mistake," Vallis shouted. "That thing beside you is not worth your life." Jace looked at Lyra, then at the soldiers surrounding them, and finally back at Vallis. He stepped out slowly, arms half raised. "You're wrong," he said. "She's the only thing that still makes sense." And then, everything happened at once. Blasters fired, smoke bombs exploded, and Lyra screamed his name. The blast was so loud it silenced everything. Just a white flash and then nothing. No sound, no movement, only light and pressure and falling. Jace opened his eyes slowly, coughing on dust and smoke. He was lying in the dirt, chest burning. The forest was wrecked. trees split in half, soil scorched black, soldiers scattered and stunned. But Liroshi was gone. "Lyra," he croaked, dragging himself forward. "Lyra." A shadow moved near the wrecked shuttle, small and fast. Then she appeared, limping. Holding a stolen blaster, her face streaked with blood and ash. "You're alive," she said, breathless. Dropping to her knees beside him, "You came back," he whispered. "Of course," she said, helping him up. "I'm not leaving you." Behind Jace's arm wrapped around her shoulder, and together they stumbled toward the edge of the clearing. In the distance, a low humming grew louder. A shiphold, rusted, half-buried, sat just beyond the rocks. "Where did that come from?" Jace asked. "Smugglers used it long ago," Lyra said. "We can take it, if it still works." He looked at her. "And where do we go?" "Anywhere," she replied, "as long as it's away from them." They climbed into the ship, coughing through the dust and spiderwebs. Jace forced the console open. Sparks flew. The screen flickered weakly. "I can hotwire the core," he said, "but we'll only get one jump, maybe two." Lyra knelt beside him and pulled out the data shard. "There's a list of blacklisted worlds on here, hidden sectors they don't monitor." Jace grinned weakly. "You've really thought this through. I've had a lot of time alone," she said. "Thinking was all I had." The engines sputtered, then roared to life. The old ship shook. Dust rained from the ceiling, but it held. The hangar doors creaked open, wind rushing in as they prepared to launch. Outside, the soldiers had regrouped, moving in fast, blasters ready. Drones circling like birds of prey. Jace punched the throttle, and the ship surged forward. Tearing free of the forest floor and into the cloudy sky, blaster fire chased them. But the armor held, just barely. As they cleared the atmosphere, Lyra leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. "You okay?" Jace asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "I've never gone this far before." The nav screen blinked, asking for jump coordinates. Lyra entered the code from memory, a strange set of numbers and letters that pulsed like a warning. "Where are we going?" Jace asked again. "To a forgotten place," she said, "where people like me were once created, but some escaped, some hid there. You're taking me to more of you." "If they're still alive," she said, "they'll help us." Jace nodded, and without waiting, he activated the jump. The stars stretched and twisted. The ship shook violently. Alarms screamed. One panel exploded in sparks. Then everything went quiet. They weren't in known space anymore. Outside the window was a deep blue void, filled with floating debris, broken satellites, shattered stations frozen in time. Jace frowned. "What is this place?" Lyra looked out, her face pale. "A graveyard," she whispered. "A forgotten wars." The ship's core flickered, and Jace jumped to the controls, warning lights blinking red. "We lost the stabilizers." He said, "We need to land, fast." Lyra pointed there. "That moon, there's a dock built into the side." The ship barely responded. Controls sluggish. Jace gritted his teeth and fought with the system until the ship dipped toward the rocky surface. They hit hard, sliding across. Rough stone, sparks flying, metal screaming, until they stopped near a cave-like hangar. Silence again, only their breathing. Jace looked over. Lyra had passed out. The stress too much. He reached over and gently pulled her into his arms, carrying her down the ramp into the cold. Unknown base ahead, whatever waited for them inside. He knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in years, that meant something. The cold air inside the moon base was thick with dust and silence. Jace moved carefully, carrying Lyra through the dark corridor lit only by flickering emergency strips along the walls. She was still unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. He could feel how light she was in his arms, like someone who'd spent a lifetime surviving but never truly living. The walls were covered in old warnings, faded symbols. and graffiti in languages Jace didn't recognize, signs of life once lived. Done. Abandoned, he followed a map on the rusted terminal he found near the entrance. It guided him to a med bay tucked deep within the base, untouched for years, but still functional. Barely, he placed Lyra on the table, attached a scanner to her neck, and watched the screen light up with readings. Internal bleeding, nerve strain. Dehydration. She was holding on, but just barely. Jace stood there, watching the data, then slowly sat down beside her. Blaster on his lap, he hadn't known her long, but something about her had changed him. The mission had changed, his orders had been burned away. Now there was just this keeping her alive. Hours passed, maybe more, and then her fingers moved. Her eyes opened slowly. "You stayed?" she said weakly. "Of course I did," Jace replied. "You're not getting rid of me that easy." She gave the smallest smile, the kind that meant more than words ever could. Then a sound echoed from down the corridor. Footsteps. Jace stood instantly, blaster aimed at the door. But what walked in wasn't a soldier or drone. It was an older woman, gray skin like Lyra's, glowing scars across her arms, eyes wide with disbelief. "By the stars," she whispered. Another one survived. Lyra sat up slowly, her voice shaking. You're one of them." The woman nodded, stepping closer. "I was called Astra. I escaped the Varn long ago. I thought we were all gone." Jace lowered his weapon. "You know about the plan? The invasion?" Astra nodded grimly. "We've known for years, but no one would listen to survivors, especially not ones like us." Lyra handed her the data shard. "Now they'll have to listen." Astra took it with care, then looked at Jace. "You're the human who helped her." "I didn't do it for glory," he said. "I did it because she mattered." Astra smiled faintly. "Then you've done more than most ever will." For the next 2 days, they worked together, stabilizing Lyra, cleaning the data, preparing a signal strong enough to reach across systems. When the signal went out, it wasn't just a warning. It was proof: coordinates, plans, names of corrupt Varn leaders. The truth laid bare for all worlds to see, and it started a fire. From old rebel cells to hidden colonies, people began to move. To speak, to fight, one fugitive girl, one rogue soldier, and one dying moon had done what no fleet ever could. They gave the galaxy a reason to rise. As the stars shone above the broken surface of the moon, Jace and Lyra stood together outside the base, watching distant lights blink in reply. "Hope, what happens now?" Lyra asked softly. Jace placed a hand on her shoulder. "Now we make sure no one forgets what was done here." She looked up at him, eyes bright. The past behind her and a future she never thought she'd have slowly unfolding ahead, together. They turned toward the stars, not as fugitives, but as something more, partners, and maybe something like heroes.